person, a new face.
Oh, no.
Okay. I would like to call to order a special meeting of the Avalon City Council and Planning Commission. If we would please have roll call.
Pledge.
It didn't say it on here, so I didn't do it. Oh, there it is at the very top. Oh my God, oh my God. Who wrote this agenda? It's not 5 o'clock yet. But you're...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okie dokie. And if we could please have the roll call.
Good.
You could just use self-introduction.
Vice Chairman Hewart. Here. Commissioner Morris. Here. Commissioner Glass. Here. Councilman Albers.
Here.
Councilman Olson.
Here.
Mayor Marshall.
Here.
Chairman Montano. Here. Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Commissioner Patterson.
Here.
Councilmember Cassidy.
Here.
Commissioner Phillips and
Commissioner Putnam is not here.
Okay, thank you. Are there any announcements or written communications? No. Oral communications, this is an opportunity for members of the community to speak on items that are not on the agenda. You will be limited to 3 minutes and no action will be taken. Seeing none?
Walking.
We're going into our special business. Amanda?
Thank all of you for taking time out of your day to come to this meeting. We're here this evening to discuss conditional use permits for transient rentals. This is an issue near and dear to all of our hearts. With the advent of a lot of other cities in California and even nationwide having this issue brought to the forefront in their communities and how they're addressing short-term rentals, we felt like it would be prudent to come back and let's see how we're handling it. Is there things that we can learn from the other cities? Do we still want to make some changes? There's still a few things that people, issues that the community raises with us. One of them is the idea that the permit goes forward with the property. And then, of course, we've had a lot of conversations on how it affects year-round housing. So in your packet, I provided some information. Thank you to Councilman Member Albers. There was a printout of a report on how Hawaii is seeing how short-term rentals impact the housing. And there was also one in how to design a short-term rental regulation so that it accomplishes what you want to accomplish. I gave you a printout just now when we came in. I went through, spent some time with our friend Google and looked at what a lot of other cities are doing, how they're trying to handle what they call short-term rentals. And this document kind of tells you the common things that you're seeing in other cities, the things that are not quite so common in other cities, and then how we differ from the other cities. So,
Amanda, excuse me, but do you have another one of those?
I do. This one.
No,
I didn't get one either.
STR.
They're on the desk.
They should have been on the desk.
Should have been on top. Well, you weren't here. You passed them out.
I can share.
You should
Here's
have.
an extra copy.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. So what most cities are trying to accomplish is they want to identify the properties that are doing short-term rentals. They want to control them in some fashion, and they want to capture the transient occupancy tax that is due on those rentals. So some of the common things that we're seeing in other cities are that the unit must be registered in some form or fashion with the city, that they have to have a permit to conduct the rental in whatever form or fashion that city has deemed that permit to be, that it must be in a zone where the use is allowed. And most of the cities have said that zones that are primarily for single-family residents, they don't allow them. That's the zone where they restrict short-term rentals. Other cities have said that the unit must be the primary residence of the owner, and the owner must pay the appropriate TOT. Some cities have defined what a hosted versus a non-hosted rental is. A hosted is what is also commonly called a home share, where you're renting a bedroom in your house or the accessory dwelling unit in your basement, but you're living on the property. And a non-hosted is a rental where you're renting the entire property and there's no one there representing the owner. The uncommon things that have happened in other cities, and each city is trying to make this work in their community, is that the rentals are limited to a certain number of days a year. You can only rent it so many times a year. Or that the rentals are listed to hosted only. They're only allowing home shares and not full property rentals. Some cities have outright banned the short-term rentals. Some cities have imposed a cap on how many they will allow or issue on any given year. Most of the cities have adopted, a lot of them have adopted the occupancy limit that we currently use, which is 2 per bedroom plus 2. Where Avalon differs from other cities is we allow transient rentals in any zone with a conditional use permit. It may be hosted or non-hosted in Avalon, and it does not require that it's the primary residence for the owner. Almost all cities, when I read the newspaper reports of how the discussions had happened at the council level when they were considering their ordinances, the issues of how it impacts their year-round rental housing was raised. A lot of the cities have seen where commercial landlord, I don't want to say landlords, commercial developers are buying up rental property just for the purpose of making them short-term rentals. And it's a commercial business model, and it's not someone doing what most people do in Avalon, which is they're renting their vacation home when they're not using it.
Right.
So that's why you've seen, I think, some cities that have banned them or they've restricted them to hosted rentals only. So that kind of covers what's out there in the field of what we're seeing. Then I put together the discussion points, which is in our document.
Can I back up to something?
Yes, ma'am.
To something simpler to begin with? Because this discussion points is more of the meat and potatoes
Right,
of what
okay.
we want to discuss. But can we, first of all, just for consensus or whatever, look at the mechanisms we currently use to see if we have any issues with the things we're currently doing.
Of course.
As are on the sheet. That might start us to get in the spirit of things.
And the only thing I would add, and we should really applaud ourselves because we're way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
We adopted our ordinance back in 2001. But I think the other thing that we really have been in the forefront is adopting rules and regulations to impact or to control behavior, bad behaviors.
Right.
So that whole list of things that, there has to be something posted that says it's a transient rental, that there has to be a contact here, you guys know all the
Right.
various measures.
Right.
So I think I would add that to our list, that we have a complex set of behavioral controls and procedures.
Okay.
Whether in practice they work as well as we would like, just because of staffing restrictions, or people don't call because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they're too mad anyway, or
Right.
Right.
But we have them.
Okay.
Of use restrictions. Okay.
Go ahead.
One other just general thing, because we're in the coastal zone, the Coastal Commission has taken a view that if a city like Santa Monica would completely ban CUPs, that would violate the local coastal program, because it is limiting
Access.
it is limiting access to tourism in
Yes.
coastal areas, and especially they went after some cities because it is seen as cheaper than hotels, and therefore it's limiting access to lower income people in coastal areas if you put a total ban on it. You can regulate it, but the Coastal Commission has taken a view that they are generally in favor of these types of uses.
Okay. So if you would take us down this list, this commons, and then, oh, I'm sorry.
There's kind of one other thing I was thinking that's it's more of an awkward procedural thing. And that's because we require a conditional use permit to get your permit, but we really don't have standards to deny it, other than its saturation. So if one neighbor is already a CUP and the other one isn't, our standards kind of say, yeah, we're going to go for it, except where we do, I think, have strength is 3 strikes and you're out.
See, I
So-
would push back against that, and perhaps the language isn't as
Right, well, I'm just
nuanced
saying-
as you would like, because the saturation is you must deny. That's what the saturation was intended to do. But underneath saturation are all of the discretionary factors that you're supposed to consider when you're granting any conditional use permit. Is this appropriate for the neighborhood, given what you know about the neighborhood?
Right.
And I
to me,
think that
that's
it's changed over the years in the way it's been applied, and maybe that's, the language needs to be changed if that's the decision of the group.
Yeah, and I think
But-
it kind of should, because because of this, I was reading through the 3 applications that we have and trying to make sense out of it. Is this a big no? If we get if no one shows up, does it make it easier? If a bunch of people show up, does it make it harder? And really, should that be the factor?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And I think one of
and
the,
anyway, and that's just, and the reason I brought that up is one of the things in here was almost making it a different kind of permit that basically lets you try it, and then if you fail at it, it gets pulled away, and then you don't get to do it. And then I was also trying to think of, what's kind of the vision of a perfect CUP? And then it's kind of hard for me to come up with one. But other than we've had the history of that for a long time here, so we kind of know what it is. We know how they function well. Even when they function well, they're kind of a pain sometimes. Anyway, but the process we use does, I think, raise an expectation that the neighborhood's going to have a lot of influence, and it might not be as strong by the way it's being interpreted now.
well, and I
as
think.
they might think it is.
I think the condition where will it have any negative impacts on surrounding property owners and surrounding uses? And I think that phrase is the one where we've relied on how the neighbors feel about it. If the neighbors come in and they don't have a problem with it, then it's not going to be treated as a negative impact on the neighborhood. If the neighbors come out and they are not.
But that's not how it's been applied.
Right.
There's also,
Saturated.
In recent
Also-
years, that is not how it's been applied,
But-
but that was the intent.
But
Right, I don't.
The idea that there are neighborhoods where you have more homeowners, more people who are there year-round, who are going to be impacted, and that their rights should be protected and identified, whereas you have other neighborhoods where there's less density, or there are other reasons, there are fewer people who are resident homeowners and members of the working community who are going to be impacted, and so maybe the impact is not as great in those neighborhoods.
also we
Mayor,
have.
I'm sorry, Julie. Commissioner Phillips has been trying to say something for a few moments now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Although I don't know if this is often used, there's also basis for approval or denial of a CUP that if the, findings indicate that the commission determines applicant has failed to show, say if it can jeopardize, adversely affect, or endanger, otherwise constitute a menace to public health, safety, or general welfare, which is extremely broad, but that is. There is another other than just the saturation.
Also, too, when you're talking about people complaining or it would affect their property, and when the CUPs are in front of us and the neighbors say they don't want, because this house across the street was a nuisance, that house across, but no, and I always ask, did you come in and file a written complaint? There's a process, there's procedures, and nobody has done that. And they're standing in front of us complaining, and they've been complaining about the same properties, so we have the procedures in place, okay? So when you're complaining in front of us, and we've told them many a times, meetings before, please come in and put it in writing, so we have it in the file. So there is a process 3 times, and they come in front of us, and we can pull that permit. So I have a hard time when people are sitting in here complaining, but yet walk out and don't do anything about it.
And I want to clarify the 3 strikes you're out rule.
Well,
I-
not out, but they
No,
have a
I
hearing,
know.
you know what I
But
mean?
I think people use that phrase, and the the intent of that was if we have complaints, consistent complaints where the property's not being managed. It's one thing if someone calls and says, there was noise, I had to call the manager showed up, he made them go inside. Then somebody addressed the issue. But where we get complaints where I called, nobody showed up, nobody answered the phone, then that property is not being appropriately managed, and that's what we want to nip in the bud and take care of. Because the goal is, I think with all of the restrictions that we've developed over the years, the goal is to try to mitigate those impacts. And one of those mitigations is that there's a property manager that will show up when someone is being disturbing to the neighbors and deal with it.
But that's an issue of ex post facto. When someone applies for a conditional use permit for a transient rental, the owners, the people that are owners around within so many feet of this transient rental applicant is notified. But so many times, and I've made this point before, they are renters that are around it. They do not get notification. And yes, there is a sign in the window, but it is the same fear that goes throughout this town. Because of the lack of affordable housing, people are unwilling to step forward and say, I don't want this, and he's saying something against the property owner of his place and therefore making himself unpopular in the neighborhood. So there is a real fear in this town of retaliation, of losing where you are to live. And so I often think that people that live around transient rentals, and I see it on Facebook all the time, that there's this going on, and they feel reticent to come forward and articulate these fears of what's going to come next door, because they don't want to lose their current housing. So I think, my biggest concern about all of this issue is the lack of year-round housing here for residents of Avalon that's affordable. So anyway, that's what I want to say at this time, at this point.
Enforcement. It's the
Okay.
enforcement issue.
So do we want to just run through this real quick, just make sure all these little points are, before we get into the numbers
Right, so
involved?
the places where, I think what you're talking about, Mayor, is where Avalon differs from other cities.
No, where there's the same, okay. Right now, we say, number one, unit must be registered with the city. We all agree, yes, and that needs to stay, right?
Right,
Unit must have city-issued permit to conduct rental.
Correct.
right.
The units must be, we have no restrictions on zones, correct?
It's allowed in any zone with a conditional use permit.
And we want to keep that. The unit must be a primary residence. We don't do that.
We currently do
And
not do that.
We want to look at that. Well, some of those cities, one of them, it's like, you have to live in your residence for 6 months and 1 day, and then, so anyway, but we want to keep it the way it is. It does not have to be the primary residence.
Well, we have the condition where they have to live, the owner has to live in, it's not their primary residence, but they'd have to live in the unit 2 years prior.
No, I'm sorry, no. The tenants, you're thinking about the tenants
Yeah.
for 2
I'm
years.
They can't be rented for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
Okay, you're talking,
about.
sorry.
Okay, and that we
Forgot
like that
about
one
that.
too,
That was another one.
about the 2-year thing?
Yeah, should we extend that? I mean, it's 2 years.
Right. I mean, that's something to think about.
Just the
I
opposite.
think just the opposite.
Yeah.
You have people sitting there, so now you have a unit that's doing no one any good. It sits empty for 2 years while we play this
That's
game
right.
all the time. It's silly. It's not stopping it. People will leave it empty for 2 years, and then they'll come in and apply for a CUP. You just keep pushing more things down people's throats, and then they do it on the side by themselves, and we don't collect the toll.
Has
And
any
there's
of-
no one there to manage it. Or they're all on Airbnb or VRBO, where the maid is there that's gonna come at 3 in the morning. I got news for you, the maid's not gonna show up at 3 in the morning. If you come to a property management company, we're required to, we have to. Or it goes straight to Amanda, and then, my company and another company would be read the riot act. I mean, so I think extending it would be just the opposite thing. You're gonna have units just sitting empty.
And no TOT.
And no TOT.
Okay, we don't have any evidence of that other than you're asserting that. Do we know if, in fact, when homeowners are looking at a property to buy, and they have in mind to do a transient rental, that they look at the property and say, oh, there's a long-term, a year-round renter there, and I'm not going to be able to transient rent for 2 years? How do we know whether that does what we intended for it to do, which was perhaps to have somebody think twice about turning it into a transient rental. I don't know that we know that.
Well, I sell these properties, unlike yourself, so I do know this because I talk to people that do this every day. That's what they come in here. They're buying a second home for themselves. Most of this stuff, if a year-round resident wants to buy a house on this island and you can't get to it before the general public, then you don't know the rest of us, because we'd all love to have you running in our offices saying, I want to buy that property. But they don't. The property values are high. The jobs don't support the property values on this island. That's a reality. You're not going to change that by saying no one can vacation rental their home. But what you're going to do is you're going to stop a lot of income to the city. And we all operate on tourism. I mean, I think the thing is for people to get along with each other, that people respect the neighbors that live next door, that you get the renters to do that. And by doing it, you're basically having people there that are enforcing the rules and not having absentee stuff where you rent from. I get people walk into my office all the time and say, you know what, I'm here, I've rented this unit, where do I go? I have no idea, where'd you rent? VRBO, Airbnb. There's no one there.
And the city, that's an enforcement issue, and the city is trying to address
And we're working
that.
on that. And I think the intent when we adopted the restriction about the 2 years limit on the tenants, that the planning commission should consider that when they're considering the application, was to prohibit tenants from being evicted, and the next week they come in and get a transient rental permit. So that was our effort to try to.
But if you're buying a property for $1 million and you've got a renter sitting in there right now and it pays $2,000 a month, the tenant's going to get evicted either way. That's why you're not buying it as an investment for $2,000 a month.
It may not change the buying prospectus of people who want to buy a vacation home, but at least they have to address that issue in some fashion. And there's some penalty on them if that's how the property's being converted.
See, I think it does just the opposite. If I had a piece of property and I want to put a year-round rental in it, and then you guys tell me that it has to be that way for 2 years after that, I'm not going to put the unit in the year-round rental market. I'm going to keep it, and I'd rather vacation rental it because I would like to use it myself. The reason people buy homes here, it's not an investment just to make money. They want to come use them.
Right, and I think that is one of the unique things about Avalon. I'm sorry, Michael, let me finish my sentence and I'll turn it over to you, is that they're seeing cities, like we said, where people are buying the property just to make it a vacation rental. And it's not a property that they want to use for their family. And I think in Avalon, the trend is when somebody buys a property that they want to have a vacation rental on, it's because it's a property that's their vacation home. It's not just an investment property that they never spend any time in at all.
And they don't make enough money to make it.
To make them
corporations are going to come in and buy.
Okay.
And if they're illegally under basic housing laws, if they're illegally terminated, then they have recourse for that.
Exactly.
And maybe
Evicted.
because I think Hamilton Cove is unique, right? Because there are so many places and so not so many year-round renters. And maybe we have to think about a different kind of thing that applies to Hamilton Cove. I mean, Bart has he has a point, but I just think we can't apply the same kinds of things to Avalon in neighborhood areas that are already inundated with transient rentals. So I don't know, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
saying.
And I would say probably Hamilton Cove, you do find people who own 2, 3, and 4 units as investments and only use them for transient rentals.
I've got Hamilton Cove owners that own 2 and 3 and 4 units and don't rent any of them. Norris Bishton is one. Don't rent a single unit. So
That's, Micah, you wanted to?
We should also have a ordinance where a property can't sit vacant for so many years to take care of issues like that.
how do you have an ordinance that you can't? I mean, so I don't come
Use it
over
or
and
lose
use
it.
my house for 2 years now. You're saying I have to.
There's a way to, I don't know how we could.
You're talking about the permit, right?
You're talking about
Or just a house. If you buy a house and just let it sit vacant for 2 years, and we have people, an occupancy crisis in our town,
We can't, you can't get in
you
the
can
town.
find the owner. It's done in other cities.
But I don't,
That the
That would
house sat empty
be,
for
the
years,
attorney
you
can
find
answer
out.
that, but I don't
I don't
know.
believe that's true.
I don't think you can force a certain use on a property owner.
I don't believe so.
You can maybe be able to deny a use if it's not allowed in the zone, but I don't know if you can force a use.
Can you enlighten us?
I have to look at that. I don't believe that would be valid.
Okay.
They have to maintain it, but they don't have
You
to.
can maintain it,
Right.
right.
Okay, so one of the things is, okay, we can still go through this list, or we can try to tackle, is this 2 years enough or too much? What do we want?
Seems fine. I mean, based on, it seems like it's not causing that much heartache, or we'd hear about it up till now, and at least we have that in there. That's the kind of the scary thing is, ecosystem of our CUP for this has, been hammered slowly over time, and my fear is we make it worse. So I would just say if the 2 years it's working, let's just stick with it.
Let me bring up another point.
Even though I said maybe we
If
should
you're
get it.
making $30,000 a year on a one-bedroom rental or something, and now you cannot make it into a year-round rental where you could make that same amount of money, because if I do, I don't have the option to do this again when I want to come back and use it. So maybe I bought this home and I've used it for 3 or 4 years. The shine's worn off, I don't come out that often. Vacation rental, I'd rather have someone in there year-round to do it. But the moment I do that, now the 2-year clock goes again, so I'm not going to.
Okay, let me correct one thing. If you already have, and this is a quirk in our ordinance, if you already have the CUP, you can bank it, put it in the year-round market, and the 2-year restriction does not apply.
Right.
When you get ready to roll it back into the transient market, the 2-year restriction does not apply.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we do.
Which also recognizes that for somebody who bought it banking on the fact they were going to have constant short-term rentals and then the economy goes south,
Right.
you don't want to, bind that homeowner
Right.
either. And
So
it also
that is an option, and we do-
incentivizes rentals.
And we
Well,
do
and-
have a few people that have done that. That
Well,
they've
we
banked
got a
their
neighbor
rent.
who did it with 2, and now they're year-round, and that's really awesome. But then there's that whole question, is that the only situation, because we need to talk about banking, is that the only situation in which they can bank? Or the only situation when it's needed to be banked?
When else would you?
I don't know, that's part of the
Yeah.
question.
I think that is.
I think we came up with that because we wanted to give the transient rental owner an option, that if they didn't want to use it transiently for a while, we didn't want to punish them if they put it in the year-round market by taking the permit
Yeah,
away
we
from
want the
them.
property to just sit empty.
Right.
And that would, yeah.
So that's when we came up, they could bank it, they give us a copy of the lease, and all they have to do is just let us know when it's going back in the transient market.
Okay. So, I haven't heard from all 13 of us, however, or 11, whatever it is. 11, thank you, Lori. Then does it sound like we're saying now that we understand that other caveat in there, we might just want to keep it
That
the
would
way
be
it is?
better.
Okay.
That would be better that people could do that, and then you could see more of them come on the market.
And they can do that, so basically keep it like it is.
Right. Right, yeah.
Okay, and all of these other things, we don't do the hosted versus non-hosted, but we allow the hosted as well as the non-hosted though. We
Right,
do
I think
both.
you have to get a transient, you have to get a conditional use permit even if you want to rent part of your home.
Right.
Now, that may be something to consider later on if we wanted to reduce the application fee or make some concession to those people who want to rent a bedroom in their home, short term, that even if we stay with the conditional use process, maybe there's some concession that because they're owner occupied, they're only renting a bedroom, it's still, the property's still functioning as year-round housing, but it allows that owner to gain some income from the short-term market. So that may be something to consider later on.
That's one of the things I think we could just punt back to the planning commission. Instead of deciding on a rate here or something, if we want to do that or not, let's.
Yeah, because we don't have any prohibition on it.
Yeah, so let's punt that back if you all decide, oh, we're going to talk about money, how much.
Right, okay.
Okay, and then back down, and we do the occupancy limited to
Right.
2 per bedroom, even
Right.
though it's.
But right now, we're not giving the +2 during the water crisis.
Man, it's not being well, I can just tell you from across the street at my house.
There's a number you can call.
Yeah.
There's a number you can call.
Then you'll get no response.
Yeah.
So you get
You'll never get a response.
File a written
A
complaint.
two-bedroom with 8 people, just because you have beds everywhere doesn't make it.
No, it's.
And that's not,
And
that
that's what
doesn't
ruins it for
comply.
the whole town. That's
And
exactly what
that
the
doesn't
neighbors are
comply
mad
with
at.
what the application stated.
Even though the people in there are always nice, I never have a problem with the visitors, but they're over,
Now,
they're.
see, I handle mostly stuff at Hamilton Cove, but I do some stuff in downtown. And the one thing that I've done is, the vacation rentals that I have in downtown, you're not allowed to have visitors. So there's only, if it sleeps 4 people, that's 4 people. You want to meet your friends, go down to the restaurants, go down and visit our businesses, but don't bring everyone to party at this house so that none of my neighbors are mad.
Oh, well, with all the reunions that people have, that makes it tough.
Right.
But I think we should put a pin in that because the extensive use of water is a significant
Absolutely.
impact that I don't think
Absolutely.
Well, that's
that
what the
we're
complaints are
necessarily
from
controlling.
12 people gathering at a 2-bedroom house because that night they're having a barbecue and they're set up in the street like the rest of the locals do.
And this all comes back, I mean, is there a person that is attached to that rental? So maybe that's something that we have to brainstorm, is that when there's these places that have a number that no one ever responds, or a place that's something that we have to think about, because you're exactly right, the water, usually where the problems arise, there's too many people, it's.
Well, I think there's a difference between everyone gathering there for dinner, and then they all scatter back out to wherever everyone else is staying and showering and all that, and the house being over occupied as to how many people are sleeping and showering in it.
Right.
But the problem is, the more people you let come to it, how
do you
ever
know?
No.
who's sleeping? And as a property manager, how would I know?
So,
I can't do a bed check.
I have a question too, that I'm glad you raised that question because, okay, so they have the property management company, okay? So Annie calls the property management company. They're the ones renting the property, so they're in charge. It never goes to the owner. Is there any way, because the owner's the one who applied for the application, and so is there any way, like if, say Annie came to the city and said, this is what's happening, I see it over and over again, there's multiple people that I believe are staying there, can you write a letter to the owners, because it's the owner who owns the permit, not the vacation rental. The vacation rental is gonna be this, they're gonna squash that because that's their income. So if we can reach out to the owners and say, you know, this is what we've been hearing, if you can reach out to the vacation rentals because A, B, and C, you can, you know, get your permit revoked. Maybe that's where we need to start, because if the owners aren't hearing anything and it's their permit, they're not gonna be talking, you know what I mean?
I think when the
Copy the complaint to the owner.
about the unit, it should go to
To the
whoever's
owner,
managing
yes.
and the owner.
So that
they
would
see.
be, that's easily done.
Easy.
Through a change in the condition of approval.
Okay.
Is that the management company, if it receives a
Notifies.
complaint, notifies the owner.
Is there anything?
If they show up.
Couldn't we just do that as a matter of practice?
Yeah.
Yes, you
I mean, if
could,
we
but,
get the
but
complaint, we
if
can
it's in the conditions of approval, at least
Right,
it's a
easier.
requirement.
Okay.
Okay, so you're gonna have that.
Because,
Yeah, but keep in mind that most of the time when the management company is called, the city's not called. The
Right.
management company.
Right.
but that's.
So it's not information that we have to act on.
But so
But if
that's,
someone's coming and respond to it and quiet it down, do you, I mean, what's the purpose of making the phone calls to get the behavior changed? I know if we have bad people, I won't rent to you again. I just won't allow you in any of my units. At Hamilton, we only allow 4 guests to come visit, anyone that's staying in the unit, and they can only be there from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. They gotta be back out the gate. Oh, absolutely, and that makes it much easier.
We could also make it a condition that not only does, if the management company gets a complaint, that they notify the owner and the city.
That's
We
what
could
we need to do.
We could do
That's
that,
a
okay?
really
But
So-
will they do that? And will they respond?
Well, again, if they don't
It's
do that,
enforcement.
then they lose their permit through an enforcement action.
So how do we chase that down?
Yeah.
Well,
there,
How do
But-
you chase that
well,
down when they don't?
I have-
How do you chase that down if they don't report it? You're the company,
Yeah.
you have a complaint, it's my company, yeah, I'm gonna call the city, I'm gonna call you. They're
Well, let me
not gonna
ask-
step up and say, hey, I got a problem, I'm not gonna rat on myself.
Let me
They're not
ask
gonna
you,
do
all
that.
the people here, if there was a problem next to your home, and you called the management company and someone was on it right away, would you feel like now you're trying to get rid of the CUP, so I better call the city? Or would you just be happy that things are being handled as they should be? Because if you're gonna get punished for responding to them, why the hell am I gonna show up?
Right, right, that's what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
why would I show up if it's gonna go
Yeah.
anyhow?
Part of it depends how many times I've called you.
Yeah, well, exactly, but I mean, if
But-
they're doing it and they're showing up and doing it.
But-
Most management companies, unlike someone who's not there to handle it, if you have a problem renter, you don't want them back. They're making you look bad.
Right.
They're making that owner look bad.
If you
that property.
care.
Yeah.
If you care. Cindy?
Mayor, along those lines, and I just want to use this as an example because I think it bodes well for the vacation rentals as well. Hoteliers. We have guests that come in, we have no control over what the guest is actually going to do. So you have a smoker who flicks their cigarette into the neighbor's yard. The neighbor calls, complains that, you know, hey, you have guests that flicked their cigarettes and threw their pizza over the side into our yard. We have an opportunity to go handle that right away. We make notes, we determine whether or not, you know, that's the type of guest we want to have back or specifically have that guest back. And we do what we can to make sure that the neighbors are taken care of. If the neighbor has to complain 16 times in a year, the neighbor themselves is going to say, okay, enough is enough. I need to get somebody else intervened because they're clearly not paying attention. It's the same thing that I see that for vacation rentals. I would not want to punish those that are actually doing it the right way. I think what we need more of is outreach for people to feel comfortable and be able to anonymously file complaints that, hey, I called Johnny Rocket 15 times this year and it's just constantly a problem with this property, which means I don't really think they're screening their people very well, whatever the case is. But I hear the point of wanting to know what all the complaints are, but nobody has any control over what's gonna happen to a guest. And you may have, you know, an upscale, you know, no problem family when they check in, but, you know, put a 6-pack of beer in them and you might be looking at a totally different kind of situation.
And I think, unfortunately, we are in a position most of the time of reacting and handling the guest problems. Like you said, we can't control their actions until they act badly.
However, everyone that rents, I mean, I know from our major rental agency, they have a pretty intense contract that you list the people that, but I think there is a lack of, you know, I'm not going to say, because in a hotel, you know, someone is always there to watch.
That's not true.
Well, don't you have somebody
That's
there
not
trying?
true. I mean, there are times where you don't, there are some smaller boutique hotels in town that do not have somebody that lives on site.
Okay, so, but
You
then.
have a response, of course.
Right.
You have an emergency response.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the rental agencies have really intense contracts, but how are they handled? Do they get enforced? Do they ever make, do they ever go and say, we rented to you for 8 people and you have 16 people here? Out. I mean, does that ever happen?
Because that to me is the worst problem.
Right,
the big problem.
and oftentimes they'll come after hours and pick up a key in a box or in
When
a.
somebody, then the next group comes in on the 7 o'clock.
But you have to be proactive as opposed to-
Exactly, and I agree with what, we're always reacting, not
But that
preemptive.
just doesn't happen at the vacation rentals. That happens in hotel rooms as well.
Yeah.
I've seen it plenty of times, yeah.
And what's your response?
Well, we tell them, because the fire code only allows a certain amount of people in a room. So occupancy, so we tell them that they have to get another room or move to a different place, yeah.
But that's how you handle it.
Yeah,
So
but
to me,
when-
it should be the same
so
in a
if
rental.
If you are living next to a CUP and you constantly see and you are convinced that there's more people in that home than is allowed, then you need, and nothing's being done, then maybe you should write it down, come up to the city and file a written complaint.
Right.
And I think you will find, I'm going to bite my tongue for saying this, But I think the single self-managed properties are where you're gonna see that issue more often than the property rental companies, because like Commissioner Patterson said, they have a huge contract, they've got, they're doing a lot more due diligence in order to try to control who's in the unit. It's not perfect, because people will sneak in, I understand.
People do
but
sneak in.
We
They
see
do
them all.
sneak
Yeah,
in.
they do.
But when,
We see it all the time.
yeah.
I'm not sure.
What
that-
if you put a limit on the number of guests they're allowed to have over? Like at Hamilton Cove, I like the fact, I wish there was none, but we have a limit of 4. And I know, I want you to come rent it and then just go play.
But see,
You have a because you've got the gate and
Well, but
people have to
you
be
also have a
checked in.
mechanism here,
There's-
if you're sitting at a unit and it's rented for 4 people and you see 12 people sitting in front of it
Right.
and you were allowed 4, hey guys, you can just see who's standing here, that you're way over the number
Yeah.
of people.
There seems to be an issue with the enforcement, obviously.
It's exactly
But
what the issue is.
a lot of people don't want to take the time to come out here, they work, they don't want to come to the city hall and make a complaint. Is there any way we could put some kind of form or something on the
On the
internet?
website, yes.
On
I
the
think that's a
internet?
great idea.
Put something on the internet, hey, so anonymous or whatever, maybe put something on the internet, on the city website.
It's a great idea.
Hey,
Yeah,
these
the only thing
people,
is I don't know that we can revoke a permit based on an
Based on that?
anonymous complaint.
That's the one
No, we'd
thing.
have to have a
I
hearing
think if someone
if it
accuses
actually
you of
came to
something, you
that.
should
Right.
be able to face who's accusing you. And I understand what you're saying, that people are afraid to turn their name in, so they'd rather be anonymous.
See, and
But I mean, you
that's-
could
that's-
go all day long and anonymously complain about
Yeah.
whoever you
And then
want.
that's the problem. That's the problem that I have. When you're gonna go on Facebook or anywhere and you complain about something,
Social
but
media.
our doors open every single month, and I don't see anybody in here with written complaints and following the procedures that we have, I have an issue with that. I really, really do.
Those are our procedures, not their procedures.
There are procedures.
But I think sometimes we have to take a step back and say, is this working for the entire, just not for us?
No,
but
no,
for the
no,
people
but
residents?
it will work. It does work. If they do file complaints. I
And
mean,
I can understand not
do you know
having to
what-
come to City Hall, where you
But-
can call Amanda, Amanda can say, this form is online, you need to fill it out and email
Right.
it back to us. You don't have to show up.
Right.
Right.
That would make sense.
And that's not that's not anonymous.
It's not anonymous,
You have to
correct.
put your name on the form, so at least you know it's a neighbor, it's not someone from across the town.
And neither is Facebook. Facebook is not anonymous either.
Right,
And-
thank you,
and
thank you.
It doesn't matter what subject we're discussing, could be anything on this dais tonight. People are not afraid to voice their opinions and concerns on Facebook.
Correct.
But yet, I think what we're trying to get at is, we do have a mechanism. We can add to that by being proactive, having the form online, and that's
I think
maybe
that
the
would make
solution to this particular bullet point we're talking about.
Okay.
But you're talking about changing the behavior of a community, and we can change things, but I don't know if you can do that realistically, to say, let's put that out and people will do that. I'm not sure that's going to work. And then you also, I still will come back to the point that we have multi-unit dwellings where people rent that are right next door to transient rentals and are afraid to make that complaint for fear of losing their own housing. I think
Then
it's an
I'll
issue.
just note, so I kind of thought this was interesting that one or two communities, rather well-heeled communities, have set up a private right of complaint, a private cause of action. In other words, if you live next door to a transient rental and they keep you up at night, the city law entitled gives you the right to go into court. But I don't think that that's really viable. It seems to me that puts a huge burden on
We only
yeah.
have court every 2 weeks.
So, I think moving forward, we're not interested in banning short-term rentals. They're an important part of our community. In the years past, we've talked about some type of cap, but I think the market has kept it at a certain number. So I don't, if you wanted to put a cap on how many permits a year we issue or how many new ones we issue, but,
You said we have
There's-
378.
right, and there's probably, certain number of those are non-paying TOTs.
And this isn't because we don't have the report on the VRBO.
No, we don't have, so it's not really,
Well, in the larger document I gave you on page 4, based on the 2017 data, there were 369 properties on the TOT list. 48 of them reported zero income.
Say that again?
Of the 369, 48 reported zero income.
And these are ones we know they're legitimate CUPs.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so, well, one of the things when you bring up the option of a cap on the number of permits, going through the documentation that you gave to us, we now have, I calculated 378 short-term rentals since 1988. But how many additional housing units have we built since 1988 would be question number one.
Okay.
And question number two, how many CUP permits have been relinquished at any given point in those years? So if we say right now, to date, the Planning Commission has issued 9 CUPs in 2018.
Right.
Has anybody relinquished?
Well, I think the only way for us to tell if they've relinquished it, because they don't come to us and say, we're not going to rent anymore, is that they just fall off the TOT list. They just stop reporting income, they don't pull their business license.
Or they don't renew their business license.
Or don't renew their business license. It means they could be under, they could be.
So since 1988, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's 30 years, correct? That's roughly 12 units a year, average, that we've been in 30 years.
I think there are a lot more at the beginning than.
Right, it goes through cycles.
It's cycles, so I mean.
I think the moment you put a number on it, it'll be like the vehicles, I'm going to get one.
So I just want to make, I want to just talk about relinquishing. Okay? If someone has a CUP, it's going to run with the land. The only way it can be relinquished is if they voluntarily sign an agreement, which we've prepared. I think we've sent it to the people that haven't used it, that basically says, you haven't used it in a year, sign it away, or if they don't do that, then we can institute revocation under the municipal code, which would basically, you'd have a hearing before the planning commission, and the planning commission, the person would have to come up, and if they haven't rented it for a year, then under the municipal code, it's revoked. So it's a procedure where you clean it up, and the only way that they could defeat that would be to come in and say, well, actually, I have rented it out, and then they'd have to pay the penalties because they'd be caught.
See, I would think
Scott,
if you couldn't get the business license, you got to buy a business license.
Yes.
You don't purchase a business license for that year, it's not going to be renewed, right? Because you couldn't pay tax on it.
Well, no, your business license is not renewed, but the CUP is separate.
Okay, but to have a CUP, you have to have a business license to be active, correct?
To legally rent it.
To
you should have
legally
a
rent
business
it.
license.
Okay, and then say you don't rent it, but you've reported because you want to keep your CUP alive that you've rented it for so many nights and you just pay the tax.
Right?
I'm sure it happens, I'm positive of it. The city hasn't lost anything. The city gained. The city got a business license fee. The city got the tax that no one was there flushing the toilets, drinking the water, or doing anything. They paid it to keep their CUP alive. So from my point of view as a city, I'd say, let's keep the money.
And they paid for the application, which is a hefty fee.
And now, yeah, the application is absolutely enormous. I mean, at $3,200 for
It's
me
gone
to
up.
give you 12%, is it, what's it now?
Is it 30?
It's about 32,
It's about
because we
$3,200
added
to
on
apply.
the
For me to
postal
give you
permit.
12% of everything I make on my property, boy, I want a business like this.
Okay, but let me back up. Because I think the complaints that I get, and I know I get it from my family as well, is the CUP running with the land. Because.
And we can change that.
Yeah.
if we want to.
I would not be so cavalier about that. Okay.
Okay.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, I would take the position that we risk legal action.
I think so too.
By
I don't think
treating
absolutely.
a land use permit as not running with the land.
No.
Every other land use permit runs with the land.
Exactly.
And just because you call it chocolate or vanilla doesn't mean that it's different flavor.
It's a conditional use permit. It's not a right of whatever. This is a conditional use permit.
So the question
So
that
some cities have amended or drafted ordinances that say that that it's more like a license and that it runs just with the people that own it, and it's terminated with the person that owns it.
But those are cities in which they allow everybody to do it if they want. You're not making a
You're not making an application.
Right. You're not making an application. It's
You're not taking their
if
money.
you are in the proper zone, it is a permitted use.
It's a principally
provided
permitted use.
We would have
it's a
to,
principal permitted.
again,
And that's a big difference from where we.
But
agree.
it's our opinion that you could change your ordinances to make it so that we can stop running with the land. Other cities have done it. There's ways to do it if that's the direction.
I mean, my,
If that's the direction.
Let
this
me
is only
ask you
for
a
new ones.
question.
This is only for new ones.
And under this permit scheme, how does one go about getting a permit?
Then they apply.
They're talking
And what
about
is
like
the
a
application
license.
process and what are the requirements in order to qualify for this permit?
If
That you
you-
own the house?
No.
No.
We could, no, you could still put standards, we could still require some type of hearing even for a planning commission or some body where that permit is granted.
And what what factors are you applying in order to?
We
determine-
would probably use the same factors as you currently have for a CUP.
So it's
Which
reinventing
is
the wheel.
the appropriateness of
Right.
the property. We don't question the owner, like, what kind of owner are you? Are you gonna be paying attention? Do you keep your
Right.
property fixed up? We don't question the owner. We look at the land, which is why it's inherently a land permit. So I think that it'd be safe to say that has not been tested yet.
I think
And that you're talking about communities where it's permitted, if you are within a zone, you are allowed to get that permit.
correct. If it becomes a principally permitted use in the
Right.
zone.
And I
So
just
it
don't know
doesn't-
if they haven't been tested, but I know that other cities have it.
Yeah.
So,
So if it's
but
a,
if that's the direction, we can look at that more carefully.
Well, does any of Richard think that it should go,
I would like to-
shouldn't go with the city?
I have to agree with Pam.
I would like to get information on it.
Yes.
From other cities that have
I
done
have to agree
it,
with
I see what
that.
problems they've
You'd buy a
had
piece of
or
property that you're
information.
renting out.
How about we get information
I
from
can get
them
information.
and get back to this?
That's fine.
That's a
Well,
little,
then you come before and you
Pay
apply.
another fee.
Well, you're the new owner. You're a new owner. So the new owner should have to pay that fee.
in
The
looking
fee is
at
for
the,
processing the application.
right.
Right, and
we're
we're
doing a
saying
process
the
in
new
the
owner
application.
processes the
But it's doing the
application.
exact same
It's
thing that we saw
exactly,
15 minutes ago.
exactly.
It's the exact
But you
same
don't know
thing.
what else has happened in the rest of the town. Maybe something weird has happened in the rest of the town between now. I have no idea. But what if things change? So,
well,
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm renting my unit out, okay? Vacation rentals. I decided I want to sell it. Tom buys my property. Well, it's been a transient unit now for 5 years. Okay? So you're saying, okay, so it doesn't run with the land now. So Tom wants to buy it as an investment and use it for family vacations, but now he's got to wait 2 years. And
No.
no.
Now
It's not a CUP on it
if you
already.
had it already.
But he also.
So
has to
you're
get-
just, so basically, it's the same thing, except now you're just, it makes
So-
no sense.
So in other cities,
It's no sense. It's a CUP, so they're gonna get it, right?
Right. In
So-
other cities, it's not a conditional use permit. They say, in this zone, it's a principally permitted use. You still have to come in and apply and get the permit. You still have to register to pay your TOT. You still have restrictions imposed on the permit, but it's like a license to run a T-shirt shop in the commercial zone. It's a principally permitted use, and it has the conditions and the requirements that they have to meet in order to operate that use, but it's a principally permitted use in the zone. It's not a conditionally permitted use.
Right, and then the
But
problem
now-
is that you have to allow it throughout the zone.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
And
so
you,
it's-
and you
Close one
removed,
door, open another.
removed from the process any consideration of what we do now.
Right.
Are we losing a neighborhood so that suddenly there's, where people were year-round residents, it's completely transient rentals? Because I think there was a general agreement among the community, it may not be perfect the way we do it, but that was an additional impact that we wanted to avoid.
And I think that was why some of the cities imposed caps, that we currently have 300 on the books, we're only going to allow 350, and yes, they're allowed in any zone, but we're only going to allow this many.
two issues, sorry. Is there any mechanism in place now that says if someone buys a piece of property and the use permit goes with the property, is there any mechanism in place that familiarizes the new owner with the perimeters of this transient
We
rental?
just added that a few months ago, where the new owner has to
Okay,
come in and
just
register
asking.
with the planning department so that we can give them all the rules and regulations that
Okay,
apply to
and then,
that property.
and then I want to, this is what I just passed out to you. We've been saying about caps, but we're kind of like a little bit edgy about that. For me, what is disturbing me, and I will go back to my mantra about affordable housing, is that the glut of most transient rentals that have been permitted are in the flats. It seems to be, and it is the place where heretofore much of the affordable housing has been located. If you will look at that, I mean, I will admit, this is an imperfect document. The only way I could do it was to literally walk the streets, I'm a streetwalker now, and look at the signs in the window and count the number of places on the block as on a city map that were addresses. And so I will admit there is a margin of error, but I was pretty shocked looking at Clarissa that 48% of the properties on Clarissa are advertised as transient rentals. To me, we need to look, I mean, this is my offering to the discussion today, is to say, maybe it's looking at blocks and say, oh my gosh, once we've hit blah, blah percent, maybe we should stop. This is another kind of saturation to be discussed, that we are now, because I want to bring to your attention in our general plan, I mean, it says in our general plan, conservation of the existing supply of housing, section VA, V3 says discourage the demolition or conversion of existing year-round housing units and encourage the provision of replacement affordable housing. So we're working on that, but it's going to be a while. In the interim, we keep eating away at what can be affordable housing for our people. So that's, I think, you know, like, we know that most of the transient rentals are issued in the flats, and some of those areas are, I think it's a crime when you look at that, you know, 37% on Sumner, you know, and I'm not sure, like south or whether it's south or east or whatever, but just that one side, 37% of the houses there. Is that okay?
Well, then that goes back to the affordable housing thing, which nothing is really affordable right now. But when that CUP goes with the land, we all know it does increase. We don't have a number, but all the realtors have admitted that it increases the value of that property by having that CUP. That could be the difference in a family of two, perhaps being able to buy a place if that jacks it up $40,000 or $50,000 a year. And at the same time, this thing where people are paying nothing, that bothers me. Because they are keeping that, just in case they decide to sell the house, they know they're going to be able to make more money.
But if you arrive here late and you don't have the same property rights as everyone else, how is that fair, Annie? Okay, so you've got saturated in the neighborhood, and I just bought a house there, but I don't have the same rights as the rest of you that I can even apply for the CUP because I just showed up in 2018. I'm sorry, property rights should be the same for everyone.
Oh, wait, I have a question, Annie.
But I
Annie,
think
there.
zoning
And
laws
it's not going to
change.
increase your year-round housing. Places that are selling for $700,000 and above are never going to be year-round residents as a full-time rental because you can't charge enough. The jobs don't exist to pay the rents that would have to pay for the place. Now you stop that owner from coming out and using it too.
So you are saying no caps on anything, anywhere, anytime?
I'm saying I think when you start putting when the government gets involved, mess it up.
Well, I don't think that's the case. Sometimes the government is there for the protection of the people and the residents of a town, not just for the business owners. It should be half and half. And I think there is a little bit of a disparity between where they go and who gets them. And so that's my issue, is that I see neighborhoods being decimated because they are not neighborhoods anymore. Places that kids used to trick or treat are now empty. The streets are empty because they're all year-round.
A lot of those places aren't even vacation rentals. They're just vacation homes, and they're just sitting. We have a bunch of them.
But if they have a sign in their window that they rent, I don't know what to say.
They was counting the signs.
Annie, Mayor, sorry.
Okay, let's go back to Manford.
I think the challenge, the broader picture of the challenge of our world in Avalon is that we have to find some way to balance the need of our economy and the need of our residents. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, and we only have so many eggs in the basket. So how do we balance those two? If we don't have an economy, then we don't need the employees and they don't need a place to live. I think the challenge for us as a city is we have two people who need the housing in Avalon and they're competing for the same house.
Well,
and the year-round residents don't have the income to compete with someone who has the money to buy a second vacation home. I think we've heard enough from people down through the years that Bart's point that a property that sells for $700,000 is not suddenly going to sell for $350,000, which is the price it would need to be affordable to most of our hospitality industry employees. That the lack of that rental permit is not going to make that difference. One of the things that I don't know that we're going to get to tonight is perhaps we need a program where some of the income that we get off of our transient rentals, we need to divert towards housing programs. So that the goose that's laying the golden eggs that supports us, we take some of those golden eggs and we put them towards housing programs. But that requires a vote.
Can I say something?
Is that something that we could formulate as a development fee attached to the issuance of a conditional use permit?
Like part of the application fee would be a development fee?
Right.
I'm sure that's something we would have
Probably not. You have to do a tax, I think. Yeah, I'm not certain. But I just want to say two quick things, because one is important. We have a half hour left, and we do have people from the audience. And I just wanted to there's an important provision in the municipal code already that in all the years I've been here has not been talked about, and I think it's really relevant to this. It deals with single and multi-unit properties, and what it says is where the property is the only unit owned by the applicant in the city, and the applicant proposes to use the property, him or herself, from time to time, then it is presumed that a CUP should be granted. Also, if a person owns...
Put that in.
It's been in there since... It predates me.
And it has some language, it goes on to talk about multi-unit structures where one or more of the structures are...
Yeah, and it also says if someone owns multi-units, and the multi-units are utilized for year-round rental, it is presumed that the Planning Commission should grant the application. It's a fascinating little thing. So there is something
What's the section number?
Yeah, I know, exactly. It is 9-8.404.
Okay.
And I'm going to say D3, and it says, in the absence of other negative findings, if either of these two things are met, the Planning Commission should approve the application. It's the only provision in the municipal code that we have found that says that they're advised to grant a CUP. And then again, the whole purpose is these are units that are being used for full time, and someone just wants to, occasionally rent them out.
Can I say something else too regarding Paula's concerns? We have the museum, the Trailhead, and Vons, who were not required to build or employ housing. Okay? It starts up here. Those three large projects who have it's new businesses who were not required to build employee housing. Okay? These are three developers in this community. But yet we want homeowners that own single-family homes to provide year-round housing for our employees and our community. I have a problem with that.
It's too late to provide housing.
Exactly.
The Conservancy did provide housing.
That wasn't a requirement.
It wasn't required, but they did it
Okay,
anyway.
okay, well, that's good to hear, but, so, do
hear
you see what I'm saying
No,
here?
I hear your point, I just wanted it
But
on
thank you,
record
and
that-
thank you,
that
the
they did
Conservancy,
provide
for
housing.
doing that.
Okay, so let's go back to I would like, and if there's a couple more people here that would like to at least look into the CUP running
With the land,
with the
fine.
land, I think it's worth looking into, even though you don't agree, but that's okay. Okay, then
Sure, yes.
then I have a question about the people holding on to their CUPs when and I know that this isn't gonna turn into year-round housing, I get it, but however, that we get no income.
Well, they're in violation of their application.
No, they're giving, okay, all they have to do
Zero.
is give us $12.
Exactly, so therefore, maybe there should be a flat rate, okay, or something, right, a minimum.
So there is a provision in the code that says any land use permit that is not used
Is
for a
revoked
year
within
is.
a year.
It lapses.
It
Right.
lapses.
And
I wonder in this context whether we could say that use means, rented a certain number of times.
Because $100,
About 13.
I know, you got,
But you know why they do it? Because they gotta come back up here and go through this every time.
I think you could do that if you wanted to, but remember that the revocation, it doesn't automatically revoke, you have to have a hearing before the planning commission.
okay, well, but I think there should be a minimum, or when they,
$1,000 tax.
A minimum number of rentals.
I agree.
something, because these people are gonna get away with $13 is ridiculous.
No, I agree, yeah.
They're just holding it on for the value of that CUP, I'm sorry.
But they're also holding it, Annie, so that they don't have to apply for $3,200 because there's no way it costs the city $3,200 to apply for a CUP.
Well, you've got to
Send it
notify
out.
all the neighbors.
What are you
Well, it's
sending
part
in
of the
gold
fee
envelopes?
schedule.
Come on.
The
There's
fee
no
schedule-
way you're ever gonna convince me it's close, it's not $1,500.
It's,
It's no way.
I will not argue the amount of the fees because they're on the fee schedule, but the fee schedule includes public notice, it includes
All the staff
CEQA,
time.
it includes conditional use permit fee. Now we added another $900 because the coastal commission said they need a coastal development permit. So that's how much the fee is for a coastal development permit. So
But I'm just saying, that's why people hold on to them, because now you gotta come pay this absorbent rate for something that a dog with a note in his collar knows it doesn't cost this
But if
much.
somebody can bank it, it doesn't matter.
So I agree that maybe we should add like a flat rate or a fee, a yearly.
There should, I think there should be a minimum. They have to pay to maintain it.
One of the
$1,000.
One of the proposals in here was that we have a minimum business license amount.
Right.
Or a smaller amount if you pay a certain amount of TOT. So if you pay, I think I said 200, if you pay $200, $250 in TOT, then your business license would only be $50. If you don't pay any TOT, then your business license would be more.
Can you bank it if
If
you're
we
not
can do
renting
that.
it
I don't know
out?
if we can do that.
So say you have a CUP on your property, can you bank it if you're not leasing it out full-time or anything like that?
No, under the current code, you have to provide us a year-round lease.
Only it just said you could bank it, I agree, okay, you bank it, it's doing
You
the same thing, but there's no fee involved.
No, you can.
But you have to make it into
You
your.
can only bank it if you're gonna do the year-round rental stuff, right? Amanda?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I think the planning commission could take on what would that, a dollar amount be?
Yeah.
To be able to keep that and.
Okay, but remember, if it's a fee,
Whatever
and
you
it's
want.
not based on, because it's really a tax.
Or
If-
the minimum, or maybe it's just a minimum amount that they have to show that they pay us every year.
But then you're looking at an election.
What?
Because it's a fee and
No,
not a
I-
tax.
I think
If you impose
if-
a minimum TOT to keep the
No,
permit active?
no, I think it is that there has to be a certain number of nights that the property is used, or it is subject to revocation. So we can look into that, one, to see if that's legal, and then the planning commission determine how many nights.
And how much, and that would have a dollar value?
Yeah, because
No,
it's.
No,
yeah.
no, it's
No,
gonna be a
based
number
on
of
number of
nights.
nights.
Okay.
Number of nights.
But there has to be some dollar.
Well, then
Well, yeah,
minus
because there would-
12%.
There'll be 12% of something, and it's not 12% of
Correct.
$100 for 29.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So they rent it for $10 a night.
Exactly.
They still get around
I
it.
mean, that's the problem with all this stuff that we're all trying to regulate here. I mean, you've got to go to brass tacks on everything you do. It's like, come on, guys.
So the
It's
question would be if it was
I
a
think the
dollar
reason,
amount, does
the
it have
reason
to
it
go
might
to
be to
the
go
election?
through that kind of awkward process
It's a
is
dollar.
one of the perceptions is
Minimum
we've got a
dollar.
lot of these out there and 20% of them aren't real. So if we could just knock that off,
I'm gonna look at that.
But if
we might
20
feel a little more comfortable with kind of the normal
Right.
churn of people getting them and losing them. So, I mean,
So
everybody's right, but
It's
I
basically
think that's the-
enforcement, what Richard, it's enforcement.
It's not
Yeah.
happening.
And, well, it's not happening, and we also, like I said, people making written complaints.
Well, our goal
But
of
we
the-
also, I don't want to lose what we talked about, which is there seems to be some difference of opinion as to exactly the standards that the planning commission is applying when somebody comes in and you have neighbors who bring forward petitions and say, we've got too many of these, but they don't meet the saturation test. But there's still, you've got vocal neighbors saying, this is a neighborhood of people who live here year-round, and we don't want any more of these on our block. That,
So-
and
Well, I mean,
I don't know
we've
what that
tried-
looks like.
Should that go-
That's what we tried to do.
But we've
that's
turned
already-
down a
do
couple
it.
based
That's
on
already
that.
in the municipal code. It's just a matter of the application of the planning commission of the facts and the complaints to the standards that are already in the municipal code.
And I think what I have heard from people in town is, why is the year-round resident on Descanso less important than the year-round resident on Upper Marilla?
Sure.
Or Upper Terrace? Why is the quality of life for the person in the flats less
Absolutely.
important than the quality of life for the person?
Started at the top and we're
Other
down.
neighborhoods.
It's the planning commission's job.
I just approved Upper Terrace.
Yeah.
So,
But come on, you guys, it's so, the equilibrium of that is way skewed. And I still say, when you talk about people coming to complain about, if you're a homeowner and you have a transient rental and it's not the saturation level that is described in our code, and you, so there's one empty and you're the person that complains, you still can't win because it's not saturation as we define it.
So then we need to change the code, because according to my applications, everybody deserves a fair hearing, okay? We all need to come up here and we not be biased, okay? And when the application is legit and they're following everything down the application, it's our job up here to give everyone a fair hearing.
I agree. However, maybe we need to reevaluate how we do that, because and you know what, here's the thing. As Pam said at the beginning, Councilman Albers, is that if everybody is coping with this, I mean, Amanda gave us some things of what local places are doing. Like, I know that Pacific Beach just said you cannot have a transient rental unless you are an owner on premise. That is the law they just put down, because they are sick of what we're having little rumblings about in town. So all I'm saying is we're ahead of the game talking about it as we are. But I don't think we're looking at improvements in I think we always have to be tweaking and looking at this, because it's a new concept.
I'm just going to read something that's important. The commission shall deny the requested conditional use permit where the findings indicate and the commission determines that the applicant has failed to show that the requested use will not jeopardize, adversely affect, endanger, or otherwise constitute a menace to the public health, safety, or welfare, or be materially detrimental to the property of other persons in the vicinity of such use. Okay, so it's there. It is there.
Here's my awkwardness, is that's right, and if nobody sent in a letter, we're going to get a staff recommendation that says approve, and it gives all the rationale why, and then all of a sudden 20 people show up and they give us the opposite. It's really a show up or not. But anyway, it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit, because I like to rely on staff, because in a sense this should almost be an administrative procedure and we're acting as administrators.
The whole thing is we have to send out
But
the
anyway,
notice to the
I
public.
like this discussion because it's helping me.
We send the notice out to the public usually after we've drafted the staff report, and we don't know what.
Right, and there's new findings and all that, so I feel better now
Planning.
about how to interpret that.
And I think
So
the
this has been
reason,
helpful for me.
the reason that we went towards the saturation was then you're looking at empirical data, and you're not relying on a neighbor's comfort level to come in and voice their objection. It's empirical data. This is how many's there, this is too many, this is, and I think that was the goal of the saturation. It doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to it's a public hearing, people have the right to come in and voice their opinion, but then you're not relying on, like Commissioner Patterson was saying, neighbors who are intimidated and don't want to come in and speak. So I think the question, do we want to allow the...
Yes, I just wanted to make one comment before that. If you want to go back and look at your empirical data, because I think that was a good word, if you want to look at empirical data and the saturation and the whatever else is empirical, you may want to do that. I don't know.
So what you're saying is the redefinition of saturation or the
Perhaps.
revisiting caps?
Perhaps.
Okay.
Perhaps. I don't know about the, okay.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Okay, and I think there's three different things going back to the planning commission
Okay.
so far, right?
Entitlements, can it go with the land?
Yeah, there was money.
Money, do we want to revise fees?
Certain number of nights.
Abandonment,
Certain number of
yeah.
nights,
Empirical data,
the saturation,
okay?
and a possible proposal for caps.
Right.
And we're already going to add a condition of approval that if there are complaints, that the city and the owner is notified, and we're going to make complaint forms that you can either put your name or anonymously online. It'll be on there.
On the city
Obviously, if it's anonymous, that gives it less enforceability, but at least it can allow us to investigate and prevent or talk to the people as soon as possible to let them know that someone's.
Then we have a paper trail of.
Yes, exactly.
There's a paper
Right.
trail of that address that there is a complaint.
Okay, so we have another 13 minutes, and so we'd like to open this up to the public. Any,
Vacation rental people, chamber, anyone?
We have 11 minutes, but that's okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Who's counting?
3 minutes?
So just
3 minutes, I'm starting. I'm getting it going.
I won't be nearly my limit. Just one comment that I didn't hear raised among all of you regarding the reason for, or a reason possibly for some of the unused permit dollars during 2017. I'm aware of at least 3 units that were not rented for maybe all of that year due to the water restrictions, including one of our largest vacation rentals. It's actually owned by a family off the island that I knew even before I moved here, and they made the decision to withdraw it from the vacation rental program because of the water restrictions. They wanted to save what little water they had left once the restriction went into place for when they came for their own annual vacation.
so they don't really rent theirs year-round all the time, or?
No,
Yeah. So
but they would have
want
rented it a lot more had there not been the water restrictions. So there's all these intervening variables
That's a very good
that
point.
go into why someone might not have rented during a given period of time.
That's a great comment, yeah. Anybody else?
I was just wondering, what is the number of signatures you need on a petition? Or how many neighbors do you need to show up to fulfill that up to saturation rule, you know, that so people in a neighborhood don't want to live next to a hotel room, perhaps? Or you hear them coming home from the bars at night and you're not going to call. You're not every night. That's just not going to work. And so in one case in a home I lived in on Olive Street, there was a terrible fire. And the neighbors, who were islanders, old local family, jumped over a wall and jumped into the house that was on fire and got the kids out, who were, you know, they were blocked on the blockway. This was the Berksteads on Hilda's fire. And I was just wondering, is a CUP person going to be doing that kind of thing? You know, and glasses go off balconies regularly on Clarissa. And the maids don't pick them up. They're in the street. You know, people do. But people have left at that point. So there's a quality of life issue that maybe we're having problems with, like identifying and quantifying and that sort of thing. And then I have one other story. Two sisters who were retiring school teachers and a father who was a donut maker invested in their home that was falling down, actually, and they asked for just a single-family dwelling. And City Hall said, why don't you get a duplex? And we didn't even know we could do it. So the duplex sounded great, you know, we'll divide it up, and they said the stipulation with the duplex is that you have to rent year-round. You cannot have a CUP. And we just went, great, you know, that's fine. And it's been a rental to a small family ever since. And, you know, we didn't need to finance it. I mean, it was an expensive rebuild. Not on the $1 million level, but it was enough that, sure, it might have been great to have a $30,000 income on, you know, on one floor. But we are doing adequately. You know, the rental year-round is just great. And I think those seem to be disappearing. And that was a really great incentive to say, yeah, we'll make it a duplex. We'll give you something to make it a year-round. So maybe there could be some aspect where we have to start thinking of some sort of trade.
I think that was
Some
a
incentive.
density bonus.
Was it a density bonus unit?
I'm sorry?
It was
So
a density
density bonus. In other words, you were permitted to build more than the normal density would have been in exchange, and that applies to anybody who does that.
Anybody, yeah.
Was
It wasn't
that what
just
it
the
was?
State.
It was a
Isn't it
density bonus, right?
Oh,
And that was the
okay.
restriction
We
on it.
didn't know.
that the
Dave
rental.
Thompson didn't seem to know, so.
They just did it. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any other comments?
Probably.
So, okay, since you all, oh, I'm sorry.
My understanding that you guys are going to address a CUP for 2 units on Olive Street?
That's at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the next
All
one.
right. Thank you. Well, that's good. Thanks. So,
Here's somebody.
oh, okay.
My name is Corinna Cisneros. I have been with CIVR for nearly 10 years. In the 1 decade I have been with the company, I can assure you that we have constantly been at about 175 vacation rentals, constantly managing. Myself and my predecessor, Denny Hansi, who I'm sure that you all know, have always recommended the properties that are in disrepair, they're small, they don't create enough income, that they go year-round. Yearly, we have about 5 to 6 properties that do that. And then when we get a new property on board, we kind of look at a whole big picture of what benefits us, what benefits the city, what benefits the residents of the town. Now, also because of our location being inside of the post office arcade, I can assure you that we don't have that many requests of year-round rentals. We work with the teachers, we work with the employees from the hospital. Whoever comes, we try to accommodate them for at least 6-7 months of the year. Right. And not just us, but the other 2 rental companies in town do as well. So I was wondering who determines the need of housing in town? Because I know there's a lot of talk, but are we looking at the talk of the gossip, or are we looking at actual numbers of what the need is before we decide what we limit and what we don't?
Right.
So that's kind of where I stand. And again, with respect to the lady that, oh, actually, you're right here. We do represent a lot of properties on Clarissa Street, and I highly encourage you to call us. We've had a similar situation with the residents where our renters were putting shrimp and meat and all sorts of things in their trash can, which were lowering the quality of their life because they constantly had to smell all these things. And I understand that. So I said, look, we're going to go ahead and charge the owner a monthly fee and have housekeeping clean those trash cans on your behalf, because as much as we try to communicate with some people, they will, be stuck on their ways. So anytime you see a broken glass and if you see the CIVR, please don't hesitate to call us.
What do you do about extra water issues?
We have signage.
On the street and someone's hosing off their beach equipment with fresh water, and you say, we're going into a drought, and maybe we should do this.
We actually verbally make them aware. We have signage on our check-in envelopes, we have signage in all of our vacation rentals, and when we were in phase 3 of water rationing, we verbally told them, everybody checking in, that please be aware, we're under phase 3 of water rationing. If you want to continue to use this resort town as your destination for your family vacations, you have to help us preserve the water. Again, if you see someone using a hose, I personally don't even have a hose next to my house, and I have a 5-year-old. So, once again, I recommend that you let us know so we can take action. Action is better than words usually. So, and we have the staff that can do it and should do it. So please don't hesitate to let us know.
So I think in that regard, I mean, some of the issues I may have, you may have, we could just go down and talk to Karina at the office. I mean,
And if nothing gets done, then it will be a different discussion. But in the meantime, there's a lot of complaints that I'm hearing about that just don't necessarily are legit from my perspective. And we do log all of our calls, so nothing goes unheard, unlistened. So if one of the employees somehow let it go, it's it's logged in.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Can I just say one more thing regarding Janny's comment about the fire? That was in the back of my mind about CUPs because we as a hotel we get fire department comes once a year and does an inspection. Now, is a conditional use permit? Does that fall under? Do they have to have like fire extinguishers?
There's a whole list of conditions on transient occupancy rentals.
But do they get?
Who enforces that?
Enforced?
We are not currently inspecting
Okay,
transient
so
rentals.
that was my whole thing
That's
is.
an
We might be
enforcement.
including those on our
Right.
residential inspection.
You can see they separated it last.
And can
We
I,
could. Those that are-
I was sleeping.
That was, we talked about that last night.
Okay.
Paula had
Thank you.
Before,
So we-
Go ahead.
before they open, they're inspected under the municipal code and every 3 years.
Perfect.
That's what the municipal code
We
requires.
just haven't done it.
I've done it.
can I just
No
ask one?
resources.
Did you say at the start that people that come and ask to be a listing for CIVR, you tell them maybe this isn't up to snuff?
Oh,
You
absolutely.
should consider year-round housing?
Yes. I recently had somebody that had a small unit on Eucalyptus, which was a 1-bedroom. I said, look, I don't think it makes any financial sense for you to apply for the CUP. You're only going to get it for 2 people because of the water restrictions. That would be better for you for the time being, for the next couple of years, to just rent it year-round. So we don't look at the properties that, once again, we know that they won't even perform well. There's no reason for us to try to even onboard them. So they all are getting the right advice if they come and ask us. In Hamilton Cove, we recommend that they go because it's Hamilton Cove.
Thank you, Karina. We're 1 minute away, but so.
Thank you, Karina.
VRBOs and Airbnbs, once you get that report, which is coming up when?
The host compliance, we are just putting the data together to give host compliance the updated information. So probably in the next couple of weeks.
So that will go, I think.
And I think that'll be coming back to you.
Okay, and then I guess the question is, and if they need to discuss that, so will the Airbnbs and those to stay in business have to be done just like?
They do.
They do.
Okay,
They
but they're
already do.
not.
No, that's not true.
No, I got somebody who's collecting the 12% that's out of Hamilton Cove and doesn't turn the money into the city. So they're not all legit.
Oh,
And
yeah,
they're
no,
not-
I'm agreeing with
That's
that,
what
but
I'm
it's not
saying.
because of the platform. I mean, you
Right.
could go on Craigslist or
Right,
Airbnb
exactly,
or
but I
VRBO.
think
It's the
there
fact
are-
that the owner is not complying.
And what we're checking
And then
out-
that's what that company's supposed to
And that's what we're
do.
gonna check out, the ones that aren't
Right.
registered, and then you all, planning commission or whoever figures out how we handle those.
Right, how do we go after the non-compliant ones? Yes. Okay.
fine.
Thank you, council,
Once
for
again-
doing this. I'm sorry?
I think this was good.
It was very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'll be back.
And what's the next subject?
CUPs?
We have 3 transient rental applications.
Parking.
This is great. Thank you,
Parking.
everyone. Thank you, public, for coming. Meeting adjourned. Good night, Tony.
Right.